This is Colin Liddell, and this is the Shortpod, a brief and succinct podcast commenting on the events and issues of the day. Today it is the 7th of November, 2023, and this time I'm going to talk about the geopolitical situation, because there's quite a lot going on. We have not one, but two quite big wars underway. One war looks like it might get a bit smaller. It might tail off. The other war looks like it might get a lot bigger. Alternatively, both wars might get bigger. There's also the possibility in some people's minds of a third war breaking out, with concerns about Taiwan and the threat posed by the Communist Chinese government. In fact, it could be claimed that each war lowers the threshold for another war. Would the war in Gaza be happening if there was peace in the Ukraine? And with wars in Gaza and the Ukraine region, isn't this the ideal time for China to make a move on Taiwan, etc.? Personally, I don't think Taiwan is going to attack Taiwan at the moment, or even in the near future. And this is because of a certain calculation the Chinese must be making. Now, back in 1941, we had a situation not entirely dissimilar to today. There was a war raging on two fronts in Europe, with Britain and the Soviet Union fighting against Germany, and Germany was actually doing quite well. What turned it all around, however, was Japan's entrance into the war, because this precipitated America's entry into the war. Before the attack on Pearl Harbor, the American administration of Franklin D. Roosevelt had been generally ineffectual in altering the course of history. This was because America was a democracy, and it was a democracy where a lot of people were skeptical about becoming directly involved in war. While there was a lot of sentiment and sympathy for some of the countries fighting against Nazi Germany, this was all in soft focus, and it wasn't particularly useful to the parties engaged in the war. It's a clear analogy here with what's going on in the Ukraine. American military aid has been very important, but Americans don't really want to get directly involved, and they're very wary about doing anything to, inverted commas, provoke the Russians. So American support for the Ukraine remains limited in its effectiveness. This is just like the situation in 1941. America was doing quite a lot to help Britain. There was the Lend-Lease program. Some of that was being funneled to the Russians, but this was quite a different situation from America being directly involved in the war. The Roosevelt administration had extreme difficulty attempting to mobilize Americans. But one single attack by the Japanese Imperial Navy on Pearl Harbor completely changed things and galvanized America into a country that was prepared to pour enormous resources of men, money, and blood into a 4-year-long war. Now, this is rather how the Chinese look at things now. They calculate that an attack on Taiwan might result in a direct clash with America. There are considerable American forces based in the Western Pacific, in Korea and Japan. The American Navy is frequently active in the waters off China, and so a sudden attempt to take over Taiwan could actually lead to Americans getting killed by Chinese. And then, just like with Pearl Harbor in 1941, that could have a very galvanizing effect on America and lead to sustained resistance from the United States. This is the last thing that China wants. From the Chinese point of view, any kind of conflict would also enable America to unify, rather like they did in the wake of 9/11. The Chinese will also have noted that one of the reasons why Russia's attack on the Ukraine was less than successful was because the Russian attack had a galvanizing effect on Ukraine and helped to unify that society much more than it had been. Before Putin's invasion, it was a very much more divided society. Likewise with Israel. Israel was almost fallen apart until the Hamas attack served to galvanize again and unite the Israelis. So this is the thing that the Chinese are most worried about. In peacetime, America can be a much more divided country, a much more ineffectual country than in wartime. Wartime brings everybody together, and peacetime allows people to be easily divided, to fall out, to polarize, to squabble, and left to its own devices, America becomes a semi-dysfunctional country. It has no long-term plan. It has no long-term stable, reliable political leadership. And this is probably what the Chinese are counting on. They have a much more unified society due to their lack of freedom. They have a much more long-termist view due to their unchanging leadership. And if China is able just to steer a steady course, its star will continue to rise vis-a-vis America. And that will enable it to have greater strength, greater predominance over the area it wishes to control, which of course includes Taiwan and several other parts of Asia and the Pacific. So I think that the idea that the Ukrainian war and the Gazan war lower the threshold for a war over Taiwan, I think that is actually mistaken. I think in a strange way, the two wars in the West will serve as a kind of warning to the Chinese not to make their move too soon. They see the West as decadent and self-defeating, unless provoked. Over and out.